Welcome everyone to our webinar today, which as you know is on the topic of how you can use mPACT social media analytics to improve the performance of your sales, marketing, and customer service operations. I'm Steve Casey. I head marketing for mBlast, and I'm joined today by Patrick Hurley. Pat is our Director of Product Marketing. Welcome, Pat.
Hi, how's everyone doing?
So if we could move to the next slide. So over the next 60 minutes, we'll give you a quick introduction to mPACT. I'll cover a couple of key points to give you a general sense of how we do what we do, and then I'll talk about a few case studies. So you may recognize some of the use cases that our clients are engaged with us in to deliver value for their organizations. But we'll spend the bulk of the time on the demonstration that Pat will be conducting. We'll also leave time at the back end for questions and answers. You can send those questions directly to us on Twitter using the hashtag you see at the bottom of the screen at mblastlive, or alternatively you can use the question box on your GoToWebinar control panel. Next slide. So we're broadly speaking in the business of social media analytics. That's the defined market category that objective third parties use to describe what we do. As a matter of fact, we were included as one of a select number of vendors in the Who's Who in Social Media Analytics report that Gartner published back in September. But we describe more precisely what we do as web presence analytics, and that's a slightly different take that I'll explain what I mean by that in a moment. But what's important to know right off the bat is the value we provide to customers is we help them discover, analyze, and engage with the conversations and the people that matter most to their businesses. And we can do that because we deliver more signal and less noise. What I mean by that is the results we deliver are in the proper context, so they're tied to a specific topic or theme, and we're also able to filter out sort of the social chatter, and we can deliver all of those results in near real time. Next slide. So what I mean when I say web presence is it's about more than social media. Some of the other tools in our space are really super focused on the key social media channels such as Facebook or Twitter. Our belief is if you're looking to conduct real accurate analysis of the conversations and the people talking about your business or your competitors, the topics you care about, you need to look across the entire social web. So what we mean by that is all of the online content that can be commented upon and forwarded, such as blogs, articles, commentary, forums, even the online presence of mainstream media. And we gather and aggregate more than 5 billion individual pieces of that content every month. That's what we're drawing in to help our customers derive insights. And we pull that from a number of external and internal feeds. We have a very strong relationship with the fire hose vendor GNIP that we pull in lots of our customer data through that. We also have RSS feeds, our own custom crawlers, and if our customers require it, we can even pull private data feeds through the subscriptions that they have. Next slide. So pulling all that data obviously creates a couple of problems, right? All that big data, if you're listening across the social web, there are two primary problems you have. One, how do I filter out the conversations and the people I really don't care about who aren't relevant to my business so that you can focus on the ones that are. And then once you've generated that subset, let's say, of those conversations and people you do care about, you need to score them. You need to rank them. You need to assign some priority based on their influence or based on their, what we like to think about and talk about as their potential impact on your business. So we're very good at filtering and scoring by 5 different individual and specific dimensions, those being, as you can see on the screen, sentiment, topic, authority, reach, and resonance. Pat will go into detail when he shows you the demo of how we make this visible to you in the reports, but I think it's worth just providing a foundation here to say that we believe it all starts with topic. What's most important is how often a particular person speaks on the topics that you care about, whether it's a brand name, a product name, competitor name. If all you're measuring is reach, which some of the first generation social listening and social influence scoring tools focused on, meaning the number of followers a particular person has, if all you're measuring is reach without accounting for topic, all you're really looking at is popularity. And those people may be popular, but it's not necessarily true that they're relevant for your business. So starting with topic is key. Reach is important, but the third factor is authority. How often are these people cited by others? How often is their material forwarded, retweeted, right? Those three together form the core of our scoring algorithm. But there's one other element I want to talk about, and that's resonance, because not only can we help you identify the people creating content, but we can track that content across the social web. As it's disseminated from person to person to person, we can do two things. We can help you determine when that content is jumping channels. And what I mean by that is when it might move, say the original piece of content was a blog, it gets picked up in Twitter, then Facebook, Google+, somebody writes an article about it. As that happens and it jumps channels, that's a pretty clear indication that it's about to go viral or it is going viral. So being aware of that and alerted when that happens, when there's content you care about on the topics you care about that's going viral, knowing about that can be critical for crisis communications, for example. The other thing we can do is in that communications chain from creation through dissemination, we can help you identify what we call the second and third order nodes. In sort of data science terms, if the first order node is the person who created the content, those second and third order nodes are the people who are responsible for disseminating it. And what we can help you do is identify those important second and third order nodes in that chain of dissemination. Again, in a situation like crisis communications, I'll talk about a real life example in a moment, help you identify the people who are most responsible for spreading that content. So that's something that's a little different from perhaps some of the other solutions you might be looking at. Next slide. Something else that's unique about what we do as we aggregate all that content, ultimately we're pulling all of that together into a consolidated social profile. That little image at the top of the triangle is a bit small. Pat will be showing you obviously something full size. But what's captured there is the author of particular content filtered by the topics you care about and ranked by their potential influence or impact on your business. And through that process of aggregating those 5 billion items every month, we then analyze them, so filter, categorize, and rank according to the 5 elements I spoke of, which are sentiment, topic, authority, reach, and resonance. But most importantly, we match that content to people across streams. So in that profile, you can see so we don't create separate profiles. There isn't a profile for Steve Casey's Facebook presence and then my Twitter presence and then my blog presence. There's a single social profile that's created for me that shows all the content I create across all those channels, which is very important obviously to have a comprehensive view to understand the people who have a true influence or impact on your business. And there's also another interesting use case for that I'll talk about in a moment when we talk about matching our social profile to your organization's internal or enterprise profile you may have on a particular person or prospect, customer or prospect. Okay, next slide. So that's it for sort of introduction. Pat will show you the product. What I now want to do is just give you a couple of quick case studies and use cases, help you understand how people are using our product today. The first is the classic and traditional influencer ID and engagement. Everybody looks to social for this. But in this particular case, we were working with a Big Four audit firm. And what had happened is a story had gone viral about one of their clients who happened to be one of the major party's presidential candidates in the last election. This particular person had been reluctant to release his tax returns, let's say, and the story broke that a group had hacked into the audit firm's systems and was about to release those tax returns. Now, the firm knew it wasn't true, but the story was already out there, right? So identifying who generated the story wasn't as important as knowing how is it being spread. To contain this and from a crisis communication standpoint, what we were able to do was identify those key resonators, as I talked about a moment ago, with resonance analysis, show them how that content was spreading across the social web so that their communications team could reach out, and our analysis showed it was actually fewer than 20 people that they could target for their outreach, ensure that the company's denial appeared in those stories, and quickly put this story to rest and kill it. Next slide. Another use case, if the previous influencer identification and engagement is sort of, social media analytics 1.0, this is almost a 2.0, social media analytics 2.0 use case, because we're not looking here so much for individuals themselves, but at conversations. We're looking at the aggregate level to derive business intelligence, or social intelligence as we call it. In this case, we were working with a global beverage company, and what they were interested in looking at and analyzing and deriving insights from were the conversations happening online about topics that were relevant to them. So the conversations happening about ingredients in diet soda that could have an impact on health or possibly cause cancer. Conversations that were happening about the consumption of soda and how that affects childhood obesity. Or even the conversations happening in New York, for example, about limiting soda size as a way to combat obesity. This was a very, very complex query because it included hundreds of specific terms, not only the company's brand names, but those of their competitors, calling out some of those ingredients in the diet sodas that people would be talking about, product categories, and even negative health effects and their symptoms. But based on this analysis, based on this social intelligence, they were able to generate insights that they used to guide the creation of their marketing and communications initiatives, because they had a clearer sense of what people were saying, where they were saying it, how they felt about it in terms of sentiment, so they could build more focused programs, more targeted programs, and reach the right people talking about these topics in the right places with the right messages to move the conversation in a way that would benefit the company. And then final slide. The last use case I want to talk about is something we call intelligent offer. And this is a case I think I mentioned where people are combining that social profile data we create, which shows what a person is saying online, what content are they creating, what content are they forwarding, matching that social profile with the enterprise profile that an organization already has in their CRM system, in their operational systems that show what a customer's purchase history might be, their service history, their demographic data, their locations. And by combining those two pieces of the puzzle, these organizations can create that nirvana that they've been searching for so long, a 360-degree view of the prospect, of the customer, or maybe one way to look at it is a 3D view. You can see the person in totality. And based on that understanding and that knowledge, these companies can do a better job at personalizing the content they make available to their prospects and customers, the offers they make to them, and ultimately create more engagement and more sales. Now in this case, we were working with a Fortune 50 North American retailer. They're in the cosmetics business, and their goal was to boost sales. We analyzed millions of interactions from their prospects and their customers across social streams, blogs, community sites, and you can see the stats. We were able to generate many more new interactions for them, more than 1 million acquired and analyzed every month, 1,200 new prospects acquired every month. You can see the stats on improvements in click-through, but what really matters is the final bullet, right? Because what we were able to do is generate revenue uplift by combining social profiles with enterprise profiles, social data with enterprise first-person data to create more personalized and better offers for their prospects. They were able to generate nearly $100 million in additional revenue. So that's it. A few quick case studies for you to think about. They may resonate with you. If you want to move to the next slide, Pat, I'll hand it over to you and you can pick up with the product demo.
Okay, thanks, Steve. We'll just change windows here. So I'd like to walk you guys through some of the reports that we have in our mPACT system. I'll start off by saying that we offer two distinct products. One is the mPACT web-based product that you see on the screen in front of you now. And the other one is our mPACT Connect product, which is the API version of this. So basically all the reporting, all the data, all the elements I'm going to go through here in the mPACT product are also available via our API product and can be white labeled into your own software or integrated into your own visualization software. Basically anything you want to do on your own side of things can be done via API, or it can be done here in the web product, which I'll walk through now. In the interest of time, I'm going to go through some of these reports quickly and some a little more slowly, but please raise your hand, ask questions, and we can go back at the end if there's any reports that you want to see a deeper dive on, or if there's a question that I haven't answered sufficiently while going through now. So I'm going to start off by showing you a relatively simple query that we created on the mobile industry. And what we're doing here is I've created several keywords around mobile phones and smartphones, and I've used our system's ability to do filtering of results to also create sub-reports, filter reports for specific brands. As Steve mentioned earlier, excuse me, we take in about 5 billion pieces of content every month. When we take the content into our system, what we do is we extract the keywords and themes from the full text that we bring into the system, and we begin assigning biographical data to create the profiles that Steve mentioned. We use those keywords and themes, and a keyword-based query system to create the reports that you see in front of you. So this report is, the first one is the Trending Now report. This is sort of our real-time, ongoing stream of social and other data that's coming into the system. So anything that comes into our system out of those 5 billion pieces of content that matches your keyword will show up in this report, and it's a report that you can refresh either automatically or you can manually refresh it using a pull-down menu and look at the raw data stream coming into the system. And you can also, I mentioned that you can use filter keywords. So I've created some filters here for Apple and Google, Microsoft, and then for Nexus One. You'll see as we get through some of the reports that I created this query a little while ago, and you'll see the Nexus One volume is much lower, but I think that's illustrative of what we can do with some of our reports. So I left it in there to show you when we get to some of the other reports. But this is, again, a very simple report that just shows a real-time feed of things coming into our system. We also have some more sophisticated reports around articles and blogs and social media. We do break those out into separate categories in our system, articles and blogs and social media. And when you use the system and create a query, you can actually, if you have a specific need, you can define our queries to show only one or the other group. For example, we had an agency who was using us for a release of a box set Stanley Kubrick movie box set, and they were not hired to do the mainstream media part of the outreach program. They were only hired to do the social part. So you can actually turn off the articles and blogs in the system and only see the social media, or vice versa. So that probably their competitor who was doing the mainstream variety in LA Times, etc., could have turned off the social media and seen just the articles and blogs in isolation. But this report is simply again a reverse chronological order report of the articles that are coming into our system. You can slice it and dice it in sort of all sorts of different ways. You can look at individual competitors. I can look at just Apple articles, for example. You can create lists of people you want to follow and look at their lists, look at their articles in isolation. You can slice and dice the time period, and I should mention that we'll do up to 180 days of, 365 days of articles and 180 days of blogs in the system. And social media, we do 30 days in these reports. We have the ability to go back much further, and particularly in our API product, through our partnership with Connect, we have access to the complete Twitter history from day one, tweet one, and so we can use historical data when needed for special projects. It's an additional cost item, but it's something that can be integrated in any report that we offer. The social media report is basically the same thing, but instead of looking at articles and blogs, we're looking at social sources. So we're looking at things like, but not limited to, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Google+, comments on Discus, automatic blog comments for WordPress, and other things like YouTube and YouTube comments, Vimeo, etc. So again, what we're doing here is just a reverse chronological order, sort of a media monitoring solution. We're not assigning priority based on our scores in this particular report. What we're doing is giving you a feed of what's coming in the system. And again, this can be sliced and diced a bunch of different ways. You can choose different social sources. You can slice and dice the time frame. You can search within the results. So if you want to find someone talking about the iPhone specifically, you could type in iPhone and click the show button, and we would just show the results that mention the iPhone. You can also sort for negative or positive sentiment if that's what you're looking for. Pretty straightforward report. I want to switch over to the author report, which I have open in another tab. This is sort of the heart of our product for many people. This is where we get into the ranking of influencers. And as Steve mentioned, we have the 5 elements of the STAR algorithm that we use. There's 3 in particular that we use in this report. If you look at this quadrant that I'm showing you here now, you'll see on the vertical axis is the reach. And so that's sort of the measure of the raw reach, the raw social capital of the voices coming into our system. So we use a bunch of different data points and sources to provide that. Things like followers and friends, things like blog rankings, not limited to, but including things like Alexa and Technorati. And for mainstream publications, we use things like web rankings and circulation, and basically a whole bunch of different metrics that we weight together and create a overall score to show how many eyeballs a person can reach theoretically. On the horizontal axis, on the x-axis here, we've got a combination of our 2 other criteria that we use for this ranking. The first one is the topical relevancy that Steve mentioned. What we're doing there is we're looking at how often a person talks about the keywords that you've created your query around. And one thing I mentioned earlier is that when we bring content in, we extract keywords and themes. So when you put some keywords in the system, we also look at related keywords and related themes based on the set of data we brought in. So if we find 1 million articles that talk about your wireless keywords, we know from our extraction of those themes and keywords that there are other keywords like mobile, for example, that are also used. So we'll use those in the calculation as well. And what we're going to look at with relevancy is, first of all, what percentage of a person's writing talks about those keywords or related keywords and themes. Second, what the raw number of articles is. So if somebody has a lot of articles, whether the percentage is high or not, we count that as a factor. And the third thing is the recency. We think that when you're looking for an influencer today, you want to find somebody who's talking about the topic now. So we put more weight on an article or a tweet or a blog or a post that was yesterday versus one that was a week ago versus one that was 6 months ago. So over time, if somebody stops writing as frequently about your topic, their recency score will go down, and their weighted score for relevancy will go down as well. So we're looking for people who talk about it a lot, talk about it as a big percentage of what they talk about in general, and have talked about it recently. The other factor here on the x-axis is the authority score, and Steve mentioned that briefly in this presentation as well. What we're looking at with authority is what happens when a person writes about your topic. Does it get retweeted? Does it get reposted? Does someone take the link to your article and tweet it? Is there a track back on your blog? So we're looking at all sorts of different interactions and seeing what happens when you write something. Is there interaction? Is there activity around what you've written? Is there, is it making an influence? Is it somehow making its way around the web? And one thing that we do that I think is interesting here is that when we look at that authority calculation, we will look at the mPACT score of the person who's interacting with your comments. So, for example, if I tweeted something on my personal Twitter account about Wi-Fi, and David Pogue from later the New York Times, now from Yahoo, retweeted my tweet, I would get a big boost in authority because someone with a very high score retweeted me. Vice versa, if David Pogue tweeted something about Wi-Fi and I retweeted it, he would get less of an addition to his score because I have a much lower score than he does in that market. But we try to account for not only how much interaction there is with your content, but who's interacting and how important they are in the market. So we present this all on a quadrant graph, which you can see in front of you. Typically for a topic like mobile, which has thousands and thousands of people talking about it, we're going to see everyone bunched up here on the top right side of the screen. But on a more arcane topic, you may find that your best influencers don't have very high reach, but they have a lot of a lot of authority and relevancy. So they're down here in the bottom right quadrant. And really, depending on what you're doing, there's nothing wrong with that. One thing that you can do in our system is that these three elements of our score, the relevancy, the reach, and the authority, are all tunable when you set up a query. And what I mean by tunable is that you can create your own definition of what weighting you should have for each of those three elements. So if you're looking to maybe do something with a very mass market, and what you care most about is eyeballs, you can turn down the relevancy and authority scores and turn up the reach score. And our results will be weighted towards people who have big audiences, even if they don't talk about your topics a lot. We'll know they talk about it sometimes because they've made the cut of having the keyword matches, but perhaps you don't care that they talk about it 10 times a day, just that they talk about it once in a while and you want them to find someone with a really big audience. Conversely, if you're looking for something like a subject matter expert, you may decide to turn down the reach and turn up the relevancy and authority scores and look for those people who talk about it all the time and maybe have a smaller but engaged audience because you're looking for those subject matter experts. So you can adjust that in the algorithm, in the setup of our system, and basically reconfigure the calculations by changing all the weightings of those three factors. And you'll see in the results below that there's a number of, you can see, I think in this particular example I have the authority turned down pretty low, so you don't see a lot of authority weighting in these particular results. But again, I could go in the setup and change that, and you'd find that these would recalculate with the authority, taking a bigger percentage of the overall result set. And what you do, what we'll show you then is the top 25 voices, and you can expand that out to 100, and each of them will have the graph showing where they fit into the topic by relevancy, authority, and reach. Show their publication, show how many matches there are, and then show you a link to their most recent articles. You can also then click through, I'll click on Kevin's, and see the profile of that person that Steve mentioned earlier. And we'll just wait for that to load. I'm sure that I'm giving my computer a good workout with VoIP and having this running. Let me click and reload that. This is always the fun part of a live demo. I'm going to try one more time, and then I'm going to switch on to the next thing and let that load in the background. We'll just try someone else. We'll try Alex from GigaHome. There we go. Sorry about the delay. So what we provide in the profile is we have a team who's dedicated to tracking down the social and other accounts of a person and any information we can have about contact information, etc. So we do that in two ways. We do it algorithmically by scraping the web and trying to find this stuff, and then we have a team who will go through and sort of follow behind with the broom and look for things that we didn't find algorithmically. So this person is a reporter for GigaHome. We'll click through and see his Twitter, Google+, and LinkedIn accounts. You can see the publications that he writes for, and a lot of times we'll find there are top influencers who write for multiple publications, and you can see those here. You can see a list of his articles and blogs, and you can sort this in a bunch of different ways. You can do it by time. You can do it by author voice, things that are more on topic. You can look at different sources that he writes for and see those articles. You can also see his social, so we should see probably his Twitter account showing up in here, and you can click through. And one thing you can do is you can then decide as you're looking at somebody in our author map that that's somebody you want to follow, and that's someone you want to identify as an outreach target or somebody you want to follow as a top influencer. And in our system, you can then click on this little head icon next to their name and add them to a list of influencers. And so now he's on my mobile influencers list. So as I'm going through reports, I can actually slice and dice the reports just by people I've listed. It just caused that to reload by adding that list. So I could actually look at this and I could see just the top voices among my list. One thing I can do here is I mentioned that you can search within the results by filtering. So this was a list of influencers for mobile in general. What I can also do now is look and see a list of influencers for my individual brands that I created filters for in the system. So I can select Apple and click Show, and then I'll get a recalculation here, and I'll see a list of top voices. We're talking about Apple specifically. So the first group was talking about mobile in general. Now I say, out of that group, what subset talked most about Apple? And I'll get a similar but different lists. I'll get different rankings of the people, and some people will be the same, some will be different. And we could do that for each of the different brands. So, if, for example, you work for Apple, you might decide that you want to see the top voices that are talking about Google and Android. And maybe you can find people who are not talking about you yet and put them in your outreach target list. So that's the author map. Again, each of these reports is individual to the keyword. So we've got the overall set of keywords for mobile, and then the individual keywords for the different brands, Google and Microsoft, etc. And you'll get the same ability to click through and look at profiles and look at people's articles, etc. in that list. The next report I wanted to show you is our coverage report. This is where we look at the keywords that you created for the filter. So again, I had Apple, Google, Microsoft, and Nexus One. As I mentioned to begin with, Nexus One is an older brand, so that one is no longer getting very much coverage, but I kept it in here to show that. What we're looking at here is the relative coverage of each of the brands compared to the overall topic of mobile. So you can see graphically here and in individual graphs below how much coverage is coming in social media and blogs and articles for the overall topic of mobile, and then for each of the individual brands. So one thing you can use this for is to actually, benchmark an outreach program. If you have your brand here in this one and your biggest competitor here, over time you can look, if you have an outreach program, to see if your share of the coverage is moving up or down. I should also mention that all of these reports can be exported to a PDF, Excel, or other documents. So you can export this to, in this case, you can export the reports to Excel or PDF. And all the reports we have can be exported like that. So you can export them and use them externally for your own purposes as you go along. A similar report to the share of voice, but isolated on individual brand, is to the coverage report, is the share of voice report. So what we're doing here is just digging in on an individual brand and letting you look and see where the coverage is coming from. So as you're thinking about outreach, as you're thinking about a marketing plan, as you're thinking about some kind of engagement, you can see where most of the coverage is coming. You can see how much is in articles, how much is in blogs, how much is in social media, and you can look at that over time as well. So you can actually change time frames here, and you can expand the custom period of time and look over time to see how that coverage has changed or shifted between the different media types. And again, like the other reports, you can select the overall, you can select any of the individual brands and look at them and see where the coverage is coming for them by just using this pull-down menu. You can also, again, look at your list. So if I wanted to see where my mobile influencers were talking, the people I identified as mobile influencers were talking, I could select that list of people and show it here in the report. Our next report is the sentiment report. So what we're looking at here is we use some sort of state-of-the-art sentiment analysis, and we're going to look across all the articles that come in and look for positive and negative sentiment. Typically, you'll find mostly neutral sentiment, but depending on the topic, this topic doesn't have a lot of negative sentiment. Some of the other topics I do have in here, like this energy drinks one, I'm not going to switch right this second, but if we have questions about this, I can come back to it. We'll show the negative sentiment. There's a lot of negative sentiment about energy drinks, which probably isn't surprising. But you can filter this report, again, by looking at all the competitors, or you can look at individual competitors, and you can see what the sentiment for that individual competitor is. And we're going to show you the positive and negative volume. And when you break it down like this, you can, with a smaller data set, you can see the negative showing up. Any point on the graph here, you can actually click and see the articles, a list of the articles, and then click through to them. So if I wanted to see what the 45 positive articles were on this day, I could click here and open up in the window, and then I could actually go through and click through and read the articles. And at this point, I can also add people. If I decided that Chris Burns from Mobility Beat was someone I wanted to follow, I could add him to my mobile influencers list here and then track him. You can also, when you see an article in the system, you can use the star here to add it to basically an Instapaper like read later list. So I could say, I want to read this article. I don't have time now, but I want to read this article about Kit Kat. And click the star, and that will be added to my reading list. And then I go back to that later on and read it at my leisure. The next report is a word cloud report. I think I just closed that too soon. A word cloud report. So what we're doing here is, as I mentioned, we extract the keywords and themes from all the content that comes into our system, and then we find the content that matches your keywords in the query. What we're doing here is looking at all the other related keywords that rise up to the top of the list. So if you had put Apple and Google and mobile devices in your keywords, we're going to look through and see, well, people are also talking about iPhone, talking about LG, talking about Samsung, talking about mobile and health, mobile and the environment, etc. So we give you a list of keywords that you can, either expand your query from, or you can use for advertising purposes, or etc. Whatever you want to do with the data, we give you some data about what people are talking about, where the conversations are, what themes the conversations that relate to your keywords have. We offer a demographics report, and today this is a pretty simple report with just gender in it. Over time, as we get more data from our third-party providers like GNIP, we're going to expand this report. But what we do here is show you the demographics of the people by gender who are writing about your topic. So in this case, we're looking at the overall mobile market, and we're seeing that it's mainly men talking about it. You can see the sentiment for each kind. You can sort a list of articles by either male or female. And you can also dig in on the individual brand. So I can, if I want to see who's talking about Apple, for example, I could look at that and we'll see a different demographic report for Apple and for each of our filtered sets of results. The next report I want to talk about is a new one to us, and that Steve mentioned. This is the resonance report. So what we're doing here is we're showing you articles that came into our system that matched your keywords that had a lot of activity around them. So this gives you an idea of some of the most resonant articles, and we show it by the article, and also we color code it by sentiment. So you can see that this one is a negative sentiment with the cell phone radiation safeguards. Probably a lot of people talking about it in a negative light. This one here from Kevin Toffel, who I clicked on before, from GigaOM, is a recent article that he wrote about Siri versus Google search on Android. So what we're showing here, I can actually zoom in and out, is we present on this graph the center points are where the articles come from. We show you the sentiment of the article and the resonance of it in articles, blogs, and social media. And you can see most of this is in social media. So Kevin wrote an article here, and we can click through and see all the places where it was disseminated by others. And you can actually click, if I can move my mouse precisely enough, you can click through and look at the people, look at the URL, and click through the URL of the actual person who is a second-order influencer. So I could click through an Android Geek, and I could actually click through and read his tweet that was related to the original article by Kevin. Our next report is the location report. So we have multiple sources for this data. For articles, we tend to have our own data because we can strip that data from mastheads and other data sources about a publication. Blogs and social media are harder, but luckily we have our partnership with GNIP, and we're one of the 2 beta partners for their geolocation service. So we're using that data here. Right now we're doing it by country. Over time we're going to break that down as they expand their beta program and get more data out to us by city and province and location and state as opposed to just country. But what we're doing here is we're using 2 sources of data. The first one is if someone has identified in their social profile, like for example in their Twitter account, where they are, we'll use that data. Also, if they've turned on geolocation, so if they're somewhere and their phone says I'm in New York City and they tweet, we will use that data as well. We'll use if we have both of them, we'll use the geolocation data first and the stated location second. If we have only one, we use the one we have. And obviously, we do not have this data for everyone yet. It's still a beta program coming from GNIP. So you see the volumes here are a little smaller than they were for the overall articles and blogs where we had many thousands of articles. And here we're looking at a few thousand. Excuse me, I can drink the water so I lose my voice. And so what you can do here is you can look at this report via, again, by competitor. So I can look just at Apple, just at Google, just at Microsoft, just at Nexus One. I can change the time frames. I can look at any one of the social blogs or articles, sources individually. And then I can click through and say, if I want to see who's talking about this in the UK, I can actually click through to the details here and see a list of articles, just like I can in other reports, and dig into the details here. And click through, and I can look at any of those articles. And an article, if I open an article up here, I would actually open it in a new iframe window, so I would actually see the actual his Twitter account. I clicked on the wrong thing. I clicked on his article here, I put the wrong thing again. Well, anyway, you can click through the article and see it in a new window and open in an iframe. I'm going to get to that in a second in our engagement console. One more report to show you before I get to the engagement console is our averages report. So what we do here is when we set up a query for a customer, we start looking over time at how much data comes into our system for that query on an average day, and then we look at that's the blue line here. Then we look at the what's actually happening in reality. So we look, over time. We typically see a curve like this of articles coming in and out of the system, and we can see where the number of articles rises above or goes below the average. One thing that we do in our system is we have an alerting mechanism. So we will tell you when there's new voices found. We'll tell you when there's new social data comes into the system, and sometimes you'll see something happen where maybe it's like the example that Steve mentioned before, where something happens in the news and there's a lot of coverage. We'll actually give you a warning either in the system or via email, sort of a velocity warning of a big change in the amount of data that's coming into the system. And the averages report is another place where you can look at that and dig into individual dates. And then again, like other reports, you can actually click on the date and see what the coverage is about, that you had a higher than average number of people talking about this product. And the last thing I want to show you is our engagement console. This is also a new feature we've just added. And what you can do here is sort through, there's a bunch of filters here to sort through the data coming into our system by time, by sentiment, by priority, by status if you've assigned any status to an article coming in. And you can also assign it to individual people on your team. And you can sort it by either date, or in this case I have it sorted by mPACT scores. So people who have higher scores, higher influence scores will show up on top of the list. And what I can do here then is I can assign a priority to this. I can say this is a high priority, this article from Don Ressinger. I can assign it to myself or to someone else on my team. In this case, my CEO is sharing this tab with me, so I can assign this to him. And then I can set a status, for example, in progress, escalated, resolved. And then I can actually take my LinkedIn, Twitter, Google+, Facebook accounts. I can link them to mPACT, and I can actually click through to engage. Basically, I'll open this up in a new window, and I can engage with it, and then it'll show me my interactions. And when I'm all done with this engagement, I can click the resolve button, and it'll be resolved, and I can hide it from the set of results. And that's basically the engagement console. The only last things I'll show you before we switch back to questions, I mentioned that you can add lists of authors. So in this report here, I can actually get my mobile influencer list, and basically I can export this list and all their social profile data to an Excel document so you can have it offline. I can also edit that list here and add or delete people from it. And when I'm going through content, I can also start, as I mentioned before, I can star content to go back and look at it later. So I started this article from Chris Byrne before, and I can find it here and come back to it later on and talk about it and do something with it. And that's the end of the demonstration. So if anyone has any questions or would like me to dig into anything more detail, please let me know.
Pat, I've been monitoring here, and we have a number of questions on a pretty consistent theme. Folks would like to see sort of the setup behind the scenes. How do you set up these? I mean, you've showed essentially the results, but I think a number of people have said they'd like to see how do you create those queries, and specifically, how do you do that tuning you mentioned?
Okay. Let me switch over to this query then, the energy drinks query. I'll go to the setup page. So I'll start by saying there's three ways that you can set up your query. The first one is a topical discovery, where you look at a specific topic, and then you can use the filters to look at subtopics. So, for example, I could look at mobile to start off, and then I could look at smartphones and mobile infrastructure, et cetera, as subtopics. The one I'm showing here, and the most common one we found people using, is the company and competitor setup. I'll walk through that in a second, but I'll mention the last one quickly first, and that's the person setup. You can actually use our system to search for people. We actually have some customers who engage with large businesses and help them provide an overall social profile of their executives, and they use the person search to put the person's name and some facts about the person in there, like their job title, and things they do, and they can actually search our system to look for mentions of that person individually. With the company competitor query, what we do is set up first an area of interest. So in this case, I'm looking at energy drinks. This is actually somewhat related to that soft drink manufacturer that Steve mentioned in the case study before. I built this one as a very limited analog to that query. You can enter keywords in 4 different ways. First of all, you can use all keywords. These are a Boolean and search. What we're looking for here is keywords that have to be in the results. So if you use this, it's something you have to use somewhat sparingly, because if you put all 5 or 6 of these key phrases into the all keywords, we would only show you articles that had all those words in the article, which is probably a pretty limited set of articles indeed. The any keywords are a Boolean or search. So I can look in our data set and find any article that has one of these 6 energy drink terms in it. And you can use individual keywords, you can use key phrases, you can even add a proximity, so I could look for the words sport and drink within 3 words of each other, same sentence. Right now, the way I'm set up, they have to be adjacent, but you can actually get pretty sophisticated with the logic here and set up proximity searches as well. You can also exclude keywords. So if you are doing a query and there is a topic that is a set of keywords that can be used in a completely different context, you can put keywords about that other context in here to exclude those results from the overall set of results. For example, our founder is named Danny Briere, and there's a hockey player in the NHL named Danny Briere, exactly the same spelling. They both go by Danny. So if I was doing a person search for our Danny, I could put in things like NHL and hockey and the name of Danny Briere's team here and exclude those irrelevant results and just focusing on people talking about our Danny. You can also put in social media handles. So if you already know people you want to track, you can put in their Twitter handles and their names and things like that here in the from keywords. And we would only return results from those people. So if you wanted to use the system to track a specific subset of people, you could do that here. You can choose or not to choose to show or not show the engagement console, and then down here below is where we start getting into our filtering. So what I'm doing here is I've got this set of keywords for energy drinks. I'm going to bring in a subset of data from our 5 billion pieces of data a month. They're talking about energy drinks, and then I'm going to search within those results for specific brands. So these are really simple ones. I just did the name of the brand, Amp and Monster, but you can actually use the same advanced Boolean logic in the keyword, so you can actually have a very sophisticated keyword down here as well. And you can have up to 5 sets of companies and competitors. So any query you do in the system, you have the main query, and you can have up to 5 filtered queries to look within. You can also authorize your social media accounts here, and as Steve mentioned, there's some options that can be set up to more fully customize your query. So the first thing is you can choose whether to look at articles and blogs in isolation or social media in isolation. So that example I gave before about the agency that was doing the box set, and they were not hired to do articles and blogs, they were just hired to do social, particularly Twitter. You can from the very beginning set up and just show that set of data only. You can also exclude retweets from calculations if you want to. Typically we have that on by default, so if you don't want to count someone retweeting as influence for them, you can turn that off. You can also exclude people who don't have more than one publication from the list of authors in the author map. For example, you may find people who have a lot of Twitter followers, but they're maybe somewhat spammy or something like that. So you can use this to say, if they don't have a blog or they don't write an article somewhere, I don't want to see them in my author map, so I can turn that off. Finally, you can customize the 3 elements that we use for the author map scoring: the topical relevance, the authority, and the reach. So what we're using here is just simple sliders. There's a default setting, but if you click a custom setting, you can then use these sliders to move up and down the relative weight of each of these 3 things. Again, it's the topical relevancy, how much, how frequently, and how recently someone's talked about your topic. The authority, which is what happens when they talk about your topic. Do they get retweeted and mentioned other places? And finally, the reach is the overall raw influence on the market based on someone's number of followers or the size of their audience. And we can also have the system suggest keywords for you here. So if you wanted to iterate your query, you could have us suggest keywords, and when we came back around, we look at keywords that match, not that match, but that were also present in the articles that came in with your first set of keywords, and you could further refine your query by going back and adding those keywords to your query.
Okay, thanks for that. We have a question. Could you explain a little bit more about the authority calculation? I'd like to understand more details about how that works.
Sure. So what we're doing with the authority calculation is when a person who comes into our system has an article that matches your keywords, we're going to start analyzing that article. When we bring it into the system, we already do an initial reach calculation. So if we go back down here, we already figure out before we do any individual query calculations, when we bring an article in the system, we identify the author, and we use various metrics to determine their overall reach. So that's sort of a first step that we do before we do anything else. The second thing we do is then use your keywords and the related themes and keywords that we find in our database to measure how topically relevant someone is to the set of keywords that you've chosen. The authority, what we do then is we take that article and we look and see, we track that article across the web, and we see if it was an article on a blog, are there people commenting on it, are there trackbacks to that article, is someone linking to that blog post somewhere else, is someone tweeted that blog post URL somewhere else, and we measure how many interactions there are, and then we look at the first two things, the reach and the topical relevancy of the people who did that interaction. So it's sort of an additive process where we look and say, there were 10 interactions with this piece of content, and the people who interacted with that content had this reach score and this topical relevancy score, and we have an algorithm that weights those things and adds a certain measure of authority to the original article based on the people who did the interaction. Similarly, if it's an article in a paper or a trade publication or magazine or regular online publication, we'll look to see if that article is getting linked elsewhere, if it's being tweeted, if it's being mentioned in other articles, and we'll do the same process. We'll look at the people who did those interactions and what their scores were, and we'll come up with a weighted score for authority for that article. So we do it on an individual article-by-article basis. So if somebody has 100 articles that match your keywords and they're in our list in our author map list, we'll then look at each of those articles and see what the interaction was, measure the reach and relevancy of the people who did the interaction, and provide a score, and then feed that into the original person's impact score.
Okay, we're coming up on end of the hour here. Maybe one final question. Do you do alerting? And if you do, what mechanisms do you use?
Okay. So alerting there's a setting. I'm not going to go into the setting page right now, but there's a setting that you can determine what you want to see alerts for. But in any query in the system, you'll see this alerts up top. And what we're going to do, I'll click through all alerts, is we will alert you either in the system when you're here using it, and it'll show up top with a new alert, or via email to the email account you have associated with the system. And what we're going to do is, when we either calculate some new results for you when you modify a query, or when something happens in your query, like a lot of new voices are found, or there's a large amount of activity, larger than average amount of activity, we'll alert you in this alerts section here, or we'll send you an email, depending on your preferences that you've set up. So you don't have to be in the system. You could just be checking your email in the morning and see that there was a large amount of activity in one of your views, and then you could go into the system and actually see what happened and click through to that day and look at the articles and blogs or social media report for that day and see what the fuss was all about.
Follow-up question: can you alert via text message?
Not currently. That's on our roadmap, but today it's just email and in the system itself. Okay.
All right. Let me take one last look. I think that's it for questions. We're coming up, as I said, on the top of the hour. Oh, here's one. Do you have any plans to upgrade demographic reports with additional data?
We do. Let me switch back to one of the results. I would say that we do. We're dependent upon the data sources that we get for that. Demographics is sort of a tough nut to crack. So we use, just like we use for the location report, we use third-party providers like the NIP to help us provide some of that data. And I think I'm on the wrong report. I'll go back to this one. So we do have plans in the medium to long term to add additional functionality to the demographics report. Short term, we're going to just stick with the gender that we have now, but there are plans longer term to add things like other socioeconomic elements to this report.
Right.
Again, the real question there is we have to integrate some data into the system, and depending on what you're looking at for a data source, some of that data is thin on the ground. We do a lot of that with our users, with our customers. We integrate our data, as Steve mentioned earlier, with their existing demographic data, so we can take our social profiles and add them to the data that's in someone's CRM system, for example, and in our intelligent offering. But in this product right here, in the short term, we're sticking with this, and in the long term, we definitely have plans to add more, but I can't say officially when that's going to come out.
Right. I think you're right, Pat. I think it's more often that we are providing the web presence data that augments or complements the existing enterprise data that some of our clients have already resident in their enterprise systems. So in many cases they have that demographic data, and really what they're looking for is the web presence data to complement that. Okay. Well, thanks, Pat, and thank you everyone for attending. We're coming up right now on the top of the hour, as I said, so I think we'll wrap it up. Thanks for your time today. I hope this was helpful. Give you some insight into how we approach solving the problem of social media analytics, or how you can use our social media analytics to solve specific use cases such in the marketing, sales, and customer service realms. We will be obviously following up in the future with additional webinars, and we'll make sure to include you in those. We'll also be invitations so that you're able to attend. And then we'll also be making available a replay of this with the deck on our website, and that'll be part of a follow-up as well so that you can share this with your colleagues. Thanks, everyone, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.